Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Center podcast. I'm Emiliya Zhivotovskaya, your host and founder of the Flourishing Center. We are training the change agents of the world and equipping them with research-based tools for healthy, happy, and successful living. And we're so grateful that you're here.
This episode is a practitioner profile, where we highlight ordinary people that are doing extraordinary things. Each practitioner is a graduate of the Certificate in Applied Positive Psychology program from the Flourishing Center. Find out the exciting ways that people are putting the science into practice in their work and how they use positive psychology in their lives with individuals, organizations, and communities to help them thrive.
Thanks for listening, and let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and join me in welcoming Anne-Marie Messier to our Positive Psychology Practitioner Corner. She is the founder and chief strategist of Straightline Management Solutions. On our 5I change agent model, Anne-Marie would be an implementer, meaning she is implementing positive psychology with organizations through her work as a consultant and as a coach. She's coming to us live from north of Boston, Massachusetts, and a fun fact about Anne-Marie is that she is one of 9 children, the middle child sandwiched between 2 generations, and there's 16 years between the youngest child and the oldest child, and so with that, she brings such a novelty of perspective, not just to her family life, but also to the world. We're so excited to have you here with us, Anne-Marie.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Anne-Marie, tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to this work.
No, it's been a slow but obvious journey to me as I look back on it. I started out majoring in human resources management because I loved the world of bringing the psychology of people to the real bottom line struggles of businesses. So I started out thinking about majoring in psychology, and then I ended up in human resources management, which is a perfect blend of those two worlds. So then I started my work in HR, and I quickly realized that my kind of strengths were in the OD training, learning and development space and performance coaching. And I just kept going down that path. I was really at my best work and flourishing when I was helping people be their best self in the organization and give them the resources that they needed so that they would be ready for the next level of responsibility or could be the best leader that they could. So I really started to organically kind of move towards this work. And when you're doing the kind of work that you love, you get it recognized because you're better, you're performing at your best. And I kept working for organizations that would help me bring out the best in people and in teams and their leaders. So that's kind of how I fell into the work. It felt just so normal and natural to me. I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. So that's a little bit about my story.
That is so beautiful. And I love how you've just allowed yourself to be guided in every step of the way. And how did you come to positive psychology?
I came onto positive psychology when I was doing some research work in the field of appreciative inquiry. And because I found that a lot of the feedback that I was getting from my client base or people that I working with from the organization were about people would oftentimes say to me, "You've got such a positive forward-thinking perspective on things. You have a way of taking something that feels bleak and dismal and making it sound like there's possibility and potential in this mess that we're struggling with." So I started to think about the world of appreciative inquiry and did some more work on that. And then I fell onto this term in my research called positive psychology. And I was like, what is this? And then I realized as I started digging deeper into it that I really needed to learn more about it because it really just spoke to me and my approach to the work that I do.
What are some of the ways in which positive psychology has personally impacted you?
Well, personally, I think whenever you're doing this research and inquiry into a new field, you relate it back to your own personal situation oftentimes, and you have your own aha moments based on what you're looking at. And for me, the work of engagement and the work of relationships, really, I started to look at them in terms of my own life and my own work life experiences. So for me, it just started to really resonate about what was going on with me when I felt like I was doing my best work. And the work of positive psychology just kept bringing that back up to the forefront for me. So I just felt I was in there in all of these stories where when I was flourishing and at my best was the PERMA V model just made complete sense to me.
What are some of the ways in which you've integrated positive psychology into your consulting work?
It's interesting because it's the way I've really leveraged it is when I've gone and done, like, I'm going to use an example of, I recently did some presentations with entrepreneur groups. I do a lot of work with business accelerators and organizations that are looking to kind of build economic strength in mid-level cities through promoting entrepreneurship. So there's these business accelerator programs in the area that I will go and do speaking engagements with, or I'll do coaching and mentoring with. So I don't necessarily say, here I am, I'm going to teach you about positive psychology. I use the principles of it because they're so in line with what makes a successful entrepreneur. So as an example, I recently did a presentation at an HR conference called Organizational Development on a Shoestring. So I was doing a talk on how to help companies bring some of the benefits of good organizational development and growth and strengthening teams without spending a lot of money. So I actually used the choice map, which I first discovered through the CAP certification program, as a tool that they could use just to prompt the right kinds of discussions and keep things on track as teams were struggling with a particular issue. So that's one way that I have used it, as I've used a lot of the fundamental principles and the tools in some of the recommendations that I'm making to organizations or individuals in how to reframe and rethink through a problem.
I love that. And for all of our listeners, if you're not familiar with the choice map, it's the work of Dr. Mary Lee Adams, has this beautiful approach that shows that at any given point, we have a choice in how we can react to a situation. We can go down the path of judgment, or we can go onto the path of learning. When we use solution-focused, curious questions, such as what's going on here and what do I need and what's possible? What is the other person thinking, feeling, needing, wanting, as opposed to judging ourselves or judging the situation. Even when we just judge it as good or bad, it doesn't give us much to do with it. And so I love that you're giving organizations and teams these tools, because so often you will find conversations just brought to a halt because people feel judged, they feel criticized, and they come to a standstill when they could otherwise be productive and working through situations.
That's absolutely right. And a lot of times when I have done work, for example, I call them my pivotal work team. So I'll often get called in to help out with a team they have a really important piece of work ahead of them, but they're not as effective as they could be working with each other. And there's some kind of undermining energy that's going on there that needs to kind of be smoothed out in order for them to really put all of their best collective foots forward. So a lot of times when I kind of do that first launch meeting with teams, I really try to focus them on everything that you just said, which is we need to all have a shared mindset about how we're going to keep solutions focused as opposed to problems focused. Problems need to be worked through, but if you can approach your problems from a more positive lens, the whole energy in the room goes in the right direction. And some of the tools that I've learned through the positive psychology research have been so powerful and helps to refocus the group or to focus the group at the onset in the right way.
I love that. Can you give us an example of how you might utilize positive psychology to get teams into this positive or open frame of mind? Obviously, what you just said around teaching them about the choice map and the importance of staying open, but I'm curious, what else has really stood out for you as a useful intervention?
One of my favorite exercises that I use, and this was actually even before I became certified as a positive psychology practitioner, but I look back on it and it has a lot of the roots of appreciative inquiry in it. I'm going to go back to an example where I had an IT group, in a technology group that had a very large systems implementation project ahead of them. But there was a lot of kind of negative undercurrents going on, a lot of pessimism. People felt like the project had been kind of forced on them and they weren't happy about it. So we really needed to get this group to kind of work together in a different way. And some of these people, to be really honest, didn't want to work with each other. So my role was to get into this room and to get them kind of all feeling good to, okay to good to great on how they could make this project be a career high for them. So oftentimes I will use that term, like, what would we have to do to make this a career high? So I start off the group by saying, what is it about us that makes us very well suited to make this project the best that it can be? Like, what is it about us that makes us the perfect team to do this? And you start off by giving them an opportunity to almost praise themselves. So then you hear people say, well, we all have a lot of experience with this particular technology. That's one. We have the funding to make this project work. That's another one. And so the more positive kind of things that are put out there, you can actually feel the energy in the room changing. Like, yeah, we really can do this. There's going to be the normal highs and lows, but we're well suited to doing this. So I force them to kind of put all the good stuff out first before the bad stuff. Because once they're empowered and they feel like, yes, we are the right people to do this, and yes, we have the support that we need for the most part, I just would constantly keep pushing them back to the positive, to what's working in their favor, as to leverage that as a point of strength from pushing this forward. Because work is always going to be hard. Work is always going to seem like it's, it's being unreasonable with their expectations for timelines and things. That those things are always going to exist in real work situations. But when starting them on the positive and really holding them to constantly looking back at what they have versus what they don't have, you see the energy change. So that's one of my favorite ways of kind of starting off any meeting is from the get-go. Let's talk about what makes us great.
I love that as a strategy. And listeners who are not as familiar with appreciative inquiry, this is a methodology that is very intimately tied to the field of positive psychology that looks at how can we start with what is working, and that most of us as human beings, and therefore human beings operating organizations, tend to be focused on what's not working. We tend to look at problems more often than we do celebrate solutions, unless you get the type of container created, which Anne-Marie is referring to, this opportunity to invite people to have different conversations, ask different questions. And when you ask different questions, you get very, very different focus. Anne-Marie, what have been some of the challenges that you found in introducing positive psychology to organizations?
So yeah, that's a great question, Emiliya. And I think the term positive psychology, I use it depending upon the audience. I find that in some organizations that are very numbers oriented, if I use the term positive psychology as a methodology that I'm going to use, it feels a little too soft for some people. And they jump to judgment, which we will eventually help them understand what the negative power of judgment can be sometimes, but they're not there yet. Right. So I feel like it's a slow spoon feeding with the term of positive psychology. And I focus more on, let's be solutions focused. Let's think about what the power in the room is that will help us get there. They understand that language more than they say, let's think about using appreciative inquiry and positive psychology. So I think that's probably been the biggest challenge, is that I have to be very diplomatic in how I use the terms, because I'll lose them early on, and I can't afford to lose them early on. They'll shut me off. So I really have to stay focused on their problem and the business world, and then use the techniques and the tools in a way that they don't even really they don't understand that, yeah, this is exactly what appreciative inquiry is. They don't really, I don't want to say that they don't care, but it could be a little bit distracting for them if they hear these terms that sound like they're not as business oriented as they are.
Yeah. What are the words that you feel resonate with them more?
Talent management, employee engagement, people operating at their optimum. I feel that they really pay attention when we're talking about making sure that our employees are engaged, so that they might leave, but it's going to be one of the hardest decisions they've ever had to make is the goal. So I think that those are the kinds of things that I talk about. I talk about employee retention. I talk about employee engagement and some of the Gallup poll survey that shows what can happen from a bottom line standpoint when your employees are engaged. So I use kind of the business research to back into what we know is positive psychology principles.
Thank you, Anne. I love that so much. It's one of the big points of focus we try to bring to our students is that positive psychology needs to be translated, that it is a scientific approach to thriving, to flourishing. It's a study, and like any tool, you have to figure out how to use the tool in the situation that you're given. I'm curious if positive psychology has helped you overcome any obstacles.
Well, I think that some of the obstacles that I've had in my professional life is that I have a pretty wide range of interests in the field of business and organizational development. And I think at some point, the pressure is you have to pick your lane, so to speak. And what's really helped me is when they've talked about employee engagement, really thinking about what are the situations where you feel like you are on your game and that your energy level is high, your energy level is, consistent, and you don't even at the end of the day feel tired. You don't feel fatigued. You don't feel like you're drained in any way, shape, or form. So that's really helped me take that inventory for myself to say, all right, even though I know I'm capable of doing something and I've been given positive feedback that I'm good at it, I have to follow my energy levels. So I might be really good at a certain piece of work, but I don't, at the end of the day, feel energized by it or feel like, wow, I want to do that. I want to do that tomorrow too. So it's given me an opportunity to really kind of take stock in where my energy goes and start to feel more comfortable about saying no to certain pieces of work. Even though I'm capable of doing it, it just doesn't feed me like other pieces of work do. So it's kind of helped me, kind of the great divide, I call it, So I think that's one of the personal things that have helped me the greatest is about managing my energy and my time so that I'm really hanging around the kind of work that really engages me and brings me kind of that sense of energy and vitality that others just don't compete with.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anne. I so resonate with that dilemma of needing to choose between things that you really, really, really like and the stuff that you love. It is definitely a privilege to be in that kind of position, but it's also not easy. When I made my career transition into positive psychology, I had been a party entertainer. I kids' birthday party entertainer. I did weddings and bar mitzvahs and corporate events, and I loved my work. And for a very long time, I just tried to do it all. And at some point, you have to choose between things that you really, really like and things that you love. And such a supportive thing to have a framework to be able to choose from and to choose your lane, as you said.
Yeah. And I find that a lot of times when I'm coaching people, like with it's really interesting when you're dealing with a lot of entrepreneurs and you're sitting there in front of someone who really wants to make a business go of it. You really, for example, in your case where you're an event planner, there's threads that are very common, even though they feel like completely different worlds. I mean, you're managing this large organization now of, positive psychology practitioners, and the education process around that and spreading the word sounds extremely different than party planning or children's parties. But there are common threads between those two things that if you can pick them out and acknowledge them, then it feels more like, oddly enough, a very natural progression, even though they sound like two completely different worlds. You're doing a lot of the same emotional work in both areas. So when I'm dealing with people that are helping them kind of make these hard choices, I focus not on the and or, I focus on the likeness of the two events and what are the common threads and the transferable passions and the skill sets that are in both, oddly enough. And oftentimes I think that helps people make the hard, what in their mind is a hard shut off.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. And I'm curious, as you know, we emphasize the importance of self-care and that self-care is healthcare. What are some of the practices that most nourish you?
Well, when I first heard the term self-care, I automatically went to the physical, like, oh yeah, eating well and running and getting enough exercise and enough sleep. But what I really started to realize for me was I did all that kind of naturally. That's my lifestyle. But self-care for me was more about putting myself into work and in places and in relationships where I felt most authentic and most at my best. So I really started to say no more often to things that I really felt might benefit one person, the other person, more than it would benefit me. And that's not from a selfish perspective. That's really just acknowledging how much energy something was going to take from me. And so I really think the whole self-care principles of self-care broadened for me through my work in positive psychology. So it went much more from the physical to just really thinking about where I'm putting myself and how I'm spending my energy.
Awesome. And if there's any tips you have for people that might want to increase their happiness and their well-being based on what you've learned, what would you recommend that they do?
I think any work that you can do to help recognize and to become more self-aware about really what your true strengths and your true interests are. I think a lot of times we let the outside world tell us what should make us happy or the way we should be in this world. And oftentimes I find that really to increase your own happiness and well-being is to really start doing the work of learning more about yourself and really being honest with yourself about what interests you and what really brings you joy. And you might be in a field of work that you say, well, you know what? I'm not like in a joyful state. I'm a paralegal, or I'm I work in a store, or I, organize events. And I don't feel like I have the luxury of being this joyful, happy person because I need this job for the money. But I would really encourage everybody to say sometimes happiness is right there, but you're not looking at it in the right way and you're not finding it. So that would be one big piece of advice that I have for people is sometimes if you turn your lens around a little bit into a situation, you can actually find happiness with your situation if you have the right approach and attitude about it. So that would be my big one. So that's what I've personally used when I've been helping or coaching people who are looking for happiness but feel like they're in a stuck position. I try to help them to find that connection to what they're doing, because I really do believe people are doing certain work for a reason that they just need to kind of pull it out and articulate it more clearly. And sometimes you need a coach or a mentor to help you kind of see it in a whole new way.
Thank you so much for your time, Anne-Marie. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to learn about your journey and how positive psychology can be used by a consultant within an organization, how you can bring this work into teams, how you can bring this work into your own life. And if people wanted to get more information about you and your services, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Well, they can reach me at my website, which is www.straightlinegroup.com. And all my contact information is right there on the web.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. It's been great to have you with us.
Thank you, Emiliya.
This practitioner profile episode is brought to you by the Certificate in Applied Positive Psychology program, the world's fastest growing practitioner training with over 15 programs running every year in 5 cities and online internationally. Discover how you too can turn your passion for well-being, science, and helping others into a career where you help people thrive. Learn more about how you can become a certified positive psychology practitioner at getcertifiedinpp.com.
Thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. I want to encourage you to tell us, what would you love to hear more about? Is there an area of positive psychology you would love to get some more information on in terms of the research? Give us a shout out at info@theflourishingcenter.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I wish you a wonderful flourishing day.